Welcome back to Fast Market here on the Schwab Network. It's time for our cash tag segment. For that, let's bring in our next guest. It's going to be Andy Swan. He's a co-founder of LikeFolio. Happy Monday, Andy. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, happy Monday.
All right. So, Netflix got downgraded today. Stock's not even down 1%. The market's kind of weaker here too. But this almost gives you an opportunity if you're a bull on this name. Do you guys have data that kind of supports this analyst downgrade, or is this just going to be another opportunity to buy the dip because it seems like that has worked out for the last few years?
Yeah, I think the answer actually could be both. We do have data that supports the analyst downgrade, and I think Netflix kind of downgraded themselves earlier this year. They stopped reporting subscriber numbers in the first quarter of this year. And, we're really seeing that was just as web traffic, engagement, subscription intent, all the things we track at LikeFolio started to decline. If we look at web visits versus stock price, we're really seeing a sharp divergence. Netflix stock up, over 40% year to date, but web traffic has collapsed 14% year over year. And we really attribute this to breakdown in the consumer signal around Netflix. The stock is priced as a platform that's still growing, but consumers are just kind of finding other options is what, kind of our big takeaway here is there's a lot of competition, and especially in the live sports and live event segment, Netflix just still hasn't found, their footing. The other chart that I really think from LikeFolio that's very instructive here is, app engagement, again, down 10% year over year. Sentiment around Netflix originals is falling pretty fast. We really just think that the core user, the core excitement for Netflix is slipping away a little bit. There's really not much buzz. There's no breakout content, no must-see content, must-share content. And, unfortunately, no real visible innovation in sight. And I think it really comes down, to sports. Disney Plus has Wimbledon. Amazon's getting NBA rights. And YouTube is dominating Gen Z with creator content. And you just kind of Netflix there kind of sitting on it, resting on its laurels a little bit. So I think, this is a great company that has shown the ability to execute really, really well. And, lulls like this have historically been opportunities, and I think that's probably the case right now, but they definitely have a lot of weakness to sift through and a lot of headwinds to get through here, especially from the consumer perspective.
Andy, I have a page full of notes and questions that I could talk to you about when it comes to Netflix. But one of your charts, the streaming trend chart, really jumped out at me because we talk all the time about Netflix being the leader in streaming. And then I see your breakdown of streaming, and you look at YouTube, and it's really lapping the field, and it's almost lapping Netflix. I mean, 12.5% of all streaming versus 7.5% for Netflix. What is your data? What is that data saying? Most Google Alphabet traders and people that are watching this name, YouTube's almost an afterthought. It's something we throw in after cloud and search and all these other great companies that Google has. Very quietly, Andy, they're dominating streaming, aren't they?
Yeah, and streaming's dominating the landscape, I think, is the other big takeaway there. Streaming is now officially surpassing both cable and broadcast television. And so I kind of think of it as this kind of waterfall effect where it used to be that the only people capable of creating truly great content were networks and some cable providers that had the means and the resources and the distribution to get that done. And then it shifted and the digital players came along, and Netflix dominated that because, again, they had a great amount of resources. It took less for them to distribute, so they were more profitable. And now this kind of third level of that waterfall is the, independent one man, one woman creator. And they're on YouTube, they're on TikTok, they're on X, they're on Instagram, and they're creating really great stuff, really compelling stuff to the point where the guy that was I forget his name, but the guy that was in the outdoor YouTube channel and created great content for families about being an outdoorsman. When he decided to step away, the world mourned. And it's different than a Netflix. You feel that personal connection with a lot of these people, and I think that does create extreme engagement across thousands, if not millions, of niches. And so that's what Netflix is up against. They're up against millions and millions of creators that are creating very specific, very unique content in an experimental way, and the best ones of those are winning user engagement. Whereas Netflix is trying to, create the next big series that everybody's going to love. It's a very difficult game. So YouTube definitely in the driver's seat as far as, content creation and eventually something on their platform's going to hit a bullseye, and it happens every day.
Yeah, Andy, Kevin mentioned the one graphic that you guys had about streaming trends with YouTube outperforming, but then your other two, that kind of surprised me. The app usage down 10% year over year, and then the gap between, web visits versus their stock price is probably the widest I've ever seen it. And you guys are typically, relatively bullish on this name. I mean, when you look at those, is that a trend, or is that seasonality, or is it something that can flip relatively quickly if they have a couple new hits? Or is this just maybe a trend that is just beginning?
Well, we have to kind of wait and see on that. Yeah. There's been many times where we've had the opportunity to declare the top on Netflix from an engagement standpoint, from stock price standpoint, from a just corporate standpoint. And all of those have turned out to be dips. And I think that it's most likely that this turns out to be a dip as well, because historically this is a company that executes extraordinarily well, that innovates a little slower than everybody else now, than the YouTube creators by the millions, but innovates really well, and tends to find the customer where they're at. And so we're going to continue to bet on that team, that history, and that ability to execute and distribute, but with the caveat that this time might be different. We won't know for 6 months, 8 months, because that's the general cycle, where Netflix comes out with new content. But we could be sitting here in December or January talking about the new runaway hit or the new sports league that Netflix has created and totally changed the landscape. Neither one would surprise me. I think right now we just say, let's sit back, watch, let's see what Netflix does, and use the opportunity on serious down moves to pick up some shares to add to our position, because we're certainly not giving up on this company yet because of a little bit of a lull in the data.
Yep, and those valuations elevated also on a forward and trailing basis. All right, great stuff as always, Andy. Have a good day.
Thank you, you too.
All right, that's Andy Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio, breaking down for us. Kevin, I think that was